Ever found yourself in that situation? A police officer asks for your ID, and you're just not entirely sure if you actually have to show it.
Oh, absolutely. It happens all the time, right? Maybe a traffic stop on your bike, or maybe you're just walking somewhere.
Exactly. And I think a lot of us just assume, well, you always have to show ID, no questions asked.
Yeah.
But is that really the case? Is that the law?
Well, that's what we're digging into today.
Yeah, this deep dive is all about navigating those tricky moments. We got this really fascinating audio analysis from John Masters.
Right.
It breaks down a real encounter between someone riding a bike and the police.
And our job here is to pull out the key legal bits, the practical stuff from his analysis, help you understand your rights, especially about ID, when you interact with law enforcement.
Because it's not always as clear-cut as just handing it over.
Definitely not. We're going to explore sort of the bedrock principles here. Police authority on one side, your rights as a citizen on the other.
And how they clash sometimes.
Exactly. And specifically how they play out in these common everyday situations. It's really about understanding the actual laws that are supposed to govern things, not just, what everyone thinks the rules are.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. The big question. Is there some kind of general rule, a law, that says you have to carry ID or give it to an officer just because they ask?
Well, according to the analysis we're looking at, John Masters makes a pretty strong point. Often, there's simply no law requiring you to carry ID or even provide it.
No law for things like, say, a minor traffic thing on a bike or jaywalking.
That's what he argues, yeah. The analysis really hammers home that an officer's power comes from their oath, sure, but also the specific laws they're enforcing at that moment.
Meaning they need to know the law.
They have to be able to tell you what law they're invoking when they give you an order. They can't just make demands.
Which brings us to that moment in the audio. It's pretty telling, isn't it? Where the bicyclist asks, what law says I need ID? And the officer just tells him to look it up later.
Yeah, that's a key point of critique in the analysis. It's frustrating because, well, the officer giving the order should know the legal basis for it.
Right. You shouldn't have to go do homework after being stopped to see if the officer was right.
Yeah.
It just feels unequal.
It really does. It puts the citizen at a significant disadvantage right there on the street.
Okay, so we've kind of busted the myth that you always need ID on demand, but obviously there are times when you do need to provide some information. Let's unpack that. When does the law actually require you to identify yourself?
Right. This is where we need to get specific. There's a really important Supreme Court case here, Hybel v. 6th Judicial District Court of Nevada.
Hybel. Okay.
And what's really interesting, fascinating even, is how clear a line it draws.
So what's the line?
Under Hybel, the obligation to give your ID specifically your name and date of birth, only kicks in under very specific circumstances if you are being detained for probable cause.
Meaning they have actual evidence linking you to a crime.
Yes, enough reason to believe a crime happened and you were involved. Or if you were being arrested.
Okay, probable cause or arrest.
Crucially, not if you're just being stopped under reasonable suspicion, where an officer has a hunch and stops you briefly.
Or like a voluntary investigation.
Exactly. If it's voluntary, you're technically free to leave. You're just cooperating. In those probable cause or arrest situations, Hybel says, name and date of birth. That's it.
Nothing more. Like address, license number?
Nope. Just name and date of birth. The ruling is quite precise on that.
Okay, but these interactions, they aren't just about Q&A. There's a physical element too. Like in the analysis, one of the first things that happens is the officer orders the guy off his bicycle. Can they do that?
Yeah, unfortunately, they generally can. The Supreme Court has ruled that officers can order someone out of a car during a stop.
And that applies to bikes too.
It seems the legal principle extends, yes. Bikes, maybe other transport, but the analysis points out something interesting here.
What's that?
The Supreme Court ruling didn't really provide a remedy if the order seems unnecessary. Meaning the analysis suggests it might be fightable, potentially contestable later, if the circumstances really didn't justify ordering you off your bike,
Okay. That's a subtle point. And then there's the way language gets used sometimes. It can be confusing. The analysis calls it doublespeak. Like the officer saying, yeah, I know your name, but then turning right around and saying, I do not know who you are. What's going on there?
Well, it really brings up the whole power dynamic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the advice from this analysis is pretty stark. Remain silent.
Just say nothing.
It stresses not get in conversation, not say anything at all. The reasoning is that anything you say might get twisted.
Turned around on you.
Potentially, yes.
Right.
Or used to build a case. The analysis frames it as the police sometimes operating from a sort of master stance. They ask questions, you answer.
Yeah.
Not the other way around, so silence becomes a shield.
And we see the bicyclist doing that to some extent, right? He refuses to give his height, weight, driver's license number.
Exactly. And his refusal, it lines up perfectly with what we just talked about from Highbull.
Name and date of birth only, under specific conditions.
Right. The analysis really commends him for sticking to that principle, for not giving away extra information that wasn't legally required.
But then something really unexpected happens. The bicyclist himself offers something. He says, if you need a thumbprint, I'll give you a thumbprint. Where did that come from?
Ah, okay, yeah. This is where state law comes in. Federal rulings like Highbull set a minimum standard, you could say.
But states can add things.
Sometimes, yeah. And California, where this seems to have happened, has this specific rule. If you don't provide what they consider satisfactory identification.
Which could just be name and DOB if Highbull applies.
Right, but if they're not satisfied for whatever reason, California law says police can require a thumbprint.
Wow. Okay, so what happens if you refuse the thumbprint?
Here's the key distinction. If you refuse the thumbprint, they can take you into custody, but only until you are identified. You're not actually being arrested for a crime.
How long does they usually take?
The analysis suggests it's often quick, maybe only a few minutes. And the perspective offered is that it might be worth taking that chance and doing that brief detention to make a stand on your rights.
Okay, so knowing all this legal background, how did the bicyclist actually use this knowledge? He seemed really effective with his questions.
He really was persistent, precise. He just kept asking variations of what law says that I have to.
Or am I required by law to provide that?
Exactly, even when the officer threatened him with arrest for not having ID.
Which sounds intimidating.
For sure. But he stuck to his guns, asking that core question. What law says I have to have an ID on me when I'm riding a bicycle?
What was the answer?
Well, this is the payoff, really. After all the back and forth, the officer eventually admits that not having ID while riding a bike is not a citable offense.
So it wasn't actually against the law he was being stopped for?
Apparently not, despite all the pressure and implications earlier, and this is why the analysis really champions asking those specific questions.
Like the follow-up. How come you're not citing me for this if you told me I had to do it?
Precisely. That kind of question forces the issue. It exposes whether there's a real legal basis for the demand, or if it's, maybe just bluff or standard procedure not backed by statute for that specific infraction.
It really shows how knowing the rules and asking the right questions can shift the power balance a bit.
It absolutely empowers you in that moment.
Now, it's not always going to end with the officer conceding, right? The analysis mentions some other, maybe more subtle challenges.
That's true. It points out that sometimes if an officer feels you've been uncooperative, even if you were just asserting your rights correctly, they might put a little note or symbol on your ticket for the judge.
A note? What kind of note?
Just something indicating you were difficult, perhaps. And the analysis suggests that judges often do pay attention to those notes, potentially leading to a harsher outcome in court.
Wow, so even if you win the battle on the street, there might be a hidden consequence later. That's sobering.
It is. It's a sort of informal pressure point.
So is there any advice for dealing with that kind of pressure, or if you just feel cornered into answering something you shouldn't?
Yes, the analysis offers a specific legal defense tip, a phrase you can use if you feel pressured. I don't understand the question. I need an attorney to interpret it.
I don't understand the question. I need an attorney.
Okay. It's a way to pause the interaction and invoke your right to counsel without being directly confrontational, potentially.
This whole deep dive has really peeled back the layers on police ID requests, hasn't it? Moving from what we assume the law is to what it actually says.
Definitely. And the core takeaway seems pretty clear, that your knowledge is your power. Knowing the specific legal lines, like generally not needing ID for minor stuff, but needing name and DOB for probable cause or arrest, that's your strongest tool. Just like the bicyclist showed.
Right. His success wasn't accidental. It came from understanding his rights and asking those pointed questions until the truth came out that not having ID on his bike wasn't actually a citable offense in that instance.
Exactly. The power of knowing the law and using clear, specific questions to assert your rights. It's really undeniable when you see it play out like that.
So maybe the final thought for everyone listening is this. How might understanding these specific legal details change the way you handle everyday interactions? And maybe What other minor laws do we all just assume exist? But maybe, just maybe, they don't.